Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan McGuire, Manager of Professional Development at ACCE, and I'm happy to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar. Today's webinar is the next in our series, which highlights our 2017 Chamber of the Year Award. We're going to hear from Chip Cherry, President and CEO of the Huntsville Madison County Chamber of Commerce. Chip's going to be joined by Christy Drake, the Chamber on Investors Relations Manager, and two of their wonderful chamber volunteers, Lisa Abbott and Chris Russell. So the team is going to share how their chamber transitioned an aging TRC program into a dynamic new program. They'll cover the factors leading to the decision to make the change, the challenges associated with the new program, and the rewards realized because the new program was aligned with the goals of the chamber. So exciting stuff. So before I turn the program over to our presenters, I do have a few housekeeping notes. First, all attendees are in listen-only mode during the webinar to avoid background noise. Second, after the presentation, we'll have some time for questions, which you can ask by using the question function of the webinar. The question box is on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Just type in your question, and I will read the question to our presenters. If we run out of time and we get your question, or if you have a question that you would prefer to discuss with Chip or Christy or another presenter offline, please feel free to contact them directly. Their contact information will be included in the presentation on the last slide, so feel free to reach out. Also, reach out to me if I can answer any questions. We can also get in touch with you afterwards, after the webinar, if you've typed in a question and haven't gotten to it because we've run out of time. We will touch base with you. Third, the webinar is being recorded, and it will be up on the ACC website on the ACC University webinar page by no later than Monday, May 7th. And I will tell you a little bit more about how to get to that page at the end of the webinar. In addition, the presentation slides are uploaded to the webinar panel on the right-hand side of your computer screen. So just click on the presentation and you can download it. I've also uploaded the synopsis from the Chamber of the Year application on that too. So they'll both contain good information on this program. If you're not able to download either document for whatever reason, technical issues, or you just don't want to do it, no worries. I will post the slides and the synopsis and other resources that you may find helpful along with the webinar recording on our webinar page. So with that, I will go ahead and introduce Chip. Chip Cherry, CCE, serves as President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce of Huntsville, Madison County, Alabama, and Secretary of the Huntsville Industrial Development Board. Chip's chamber career spans 36 years of service with Chambers of Commerce in Macon, Georgia, Greenville, South Carolina, Fredericksburg, Virginia, and Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Chip's held the position of President and CEO in all of these chambers, with the exception of the Rocky Mount Chamber. The Huntsville Madison County Chamber was the recipient of ACC's Chamber of the Year Award for 2017 in Category 3, and we're very happy to welcome Chip and Christy and Lisa and Chris here this afternoon to talk about their Chamber On program. So with that, I will pass the presentation over to you, Chip.
Thank you very much, and we're honored to be able to share some insights on how we made this transition. Christy has been with us for 2.5 years and has been kind of the glue that has held all of this together, the volunteers, and supported everybody. And we'll hear a little bit more about that in a few minutes from the volunteers as they talk about, what they see has changed for the positive and share some other comments with you. Lisa Abbott has been a volunteer with the old TRC program and now with this program, so a total of 11 years engaged in TRC and now Chamber On. And Chris has been engaged in this program for 10 years, and he was recognized at our annual meeting for having $100,000 in sales last year. So both of these volunteers are fabulous, and I'm glad they were able to join us today to be able to answer some of your questions and provide some insights. Doing this was a very interesting exercise. The TRC program had gotten, I guess, tired would be the best way to put it. It was absorbing a great deal of time and creating some friction between staff and volunteers, and we'd gotten to the point where we had gone with a lot of these volunteers from people who were aligned with the objectives of the chamber to being more about them and gratifying them and getting the rewards, and it really wasn't very conducive to the operation of the chamber. The other thing that was interesting about it was we were getting negative feedback from a number of our sponsors regarding the interaction with the volunteers. And so we had a blend of two things or three things that were happening. One, it was a morale issue with staff. It was an issue with a bunch of TRC volunteers that were causing a lot of problems, and then sponsors who weren't pleased with the exercise. So that gets us through these first three bullet points. Then in addition, the production was declining, and then the cost of sale, the combined cost of the incentives and all the other support activities, not including staff, was way out of line. So those were all issues that made us decide to move forward and change the program. We actually talked about internally doing away with the program altogether and just moved to a staff-based model. And through a series of discussions we'll talk about in just a minute, we arrived at the point where we decided that it would be better to take the best of the volunteers and transition them over to a new program, and then give them a higher level of support by having a dedicated staff person. This slide speaks to where we were in the process, and you can see we had strong years in really I'd say 2012. We had a good year, but then it started to wane. We started to see some declines in production, and especially when we did away with trades, because it was hard to value trades, and we wound up taking trades we didn't need because volunteers would go out and get them and then come in and say, "Here, I got this for you." It made it very awkward for us to say we won't accept those. So we did away with trades in 2014, and you can see how we were trending down. I mean, we'd had a good year, even if you factor out trades in 12. 13 declined, 14 declined. 15 is when we started to change the program, and it started to move back up again. Had a really good year in 16. 17, we had a great year, and we're probably on track to bust through $1 million this year, because they've already reached almost 76%. It's gone up a little bit since the slide was produced. But I thought it would be valuable for you to kind of see where we are. And the other thing that's very reflective is our yield per investment has gone up as well. So that's a very strong indicator from our perspective. When we sat down to talk about how to do this, the chamber chair at the time, I had a lot of discussions with him and key leadership at the chamber that we were going to have to make this change. Obviously, they were a little nervous because this was a significant source of revenue. I was passionate about the fact that we need to make this change because it wasn't going to get any better under the old scenario. So we sat down and had a series of luncheon meetings. Chris and Lisa both participated in those with some of my key volunteers and a number of what we would deem the really top-notch Chamber of the Year, TRC volunteers. So that gave us some insight. One, that there was a lot of passion in those individuals who were our superstars and wanting to continue to be engaged. They provided us with a great deal of guidance on what was wrong with the program, what they would like to see in a new program. And we took that and kind of started having some internal discussions with staff about what would they like to see, what was wrong with the program from their perspective, and how we could make it better. And using the information from both of those, we developed a plan. The next big challenge for us was how do we separate ourselves from TRC? How do we separate from one and launch the next one? So that brings us to kind of the key challenges, key changes, and then we'll get to how we communicated it. But the key changes in this were, and we heard loud and clear from our volunteers, and this is something I personally committed to, is that this needed to be a relationship. This needed to be a partnership. I didn't want to have any more meetings with volunteers where I was standing behind a podium and preaching to a room of 45, 50 people. I wanted to have a conversation around the table with our volunteers and learn from them how we could enhance products, how we could make benefits better, where were we missing the mark, where were we hitting the mark, so that we could continue the process of improving what we were doing. I think it'll be interesting in a few minutes when we get to comments from Chris and Lisa to see what their feedback is on that. But I can tell you from the staff's perspective, it's been a very rewarding and productive experience having the ability to have those kinds of discussions. And it's a lot of give and take, and they provide some great guidance on how we can make things better. So that was a key part of moving this forward, was their engagement, and their continued engagement is one of the reasons we're realizing the success we are right now. So part of that discussion with them and part of our discussion internally is the TRC program. In the past, we would have somebody that would have that responsibility during the campaign. We would ramp up and then we would throttle back, and we'd ramp up and throttle back. And we collectively came to the conclusion that we really needed to have somebody that worked this all year round. The other thing is we needed to maintain that relationship with the volunteers all year round. So we meet every month of the year. We meet much more frequently during the official campaign. But one of the things I didn't plug into the slide, if we have places where we're short on an event, we've got an event coming up and we still have some tables available or other things available, and we're not during the campaign period, a number of volunteers will step up and go call some of their contacts and get them to kind of engage. So they stay involved with us all during the course of the year, which is extremely valuable to us, and they provide feedback during the course of the year. So that's been a very good thing for us. The last part of this on slide bullet number 4, for us, we wanted to be able to celebrate these folks, not have them it's hard to celebrate 45, 50 people, and really kind of point them out as being superstars. So we targeted that we would have no more than 14 in this group. First year that we launched, we had 11. We tried to add 1 or 2 in to keep that number at 14. So you do have people transition out of the market and no longer be engaged. And that's really allowed us to do some of the things like we'll talk about in a minute, but to have a special section on our website where we have pictures and profile them, some things we can do periodically by highlighting what they've done in some of our publications, and really celebrate the role they play in the chamber. And that's just not possible to do with such a large group. And also, when you start having the dynamics of 45, 50 people, then the whole complexion of who engages and how you have conversations and how they feel like they're valued really shifts. And it's really hard for us to have a personal relationship with 45, 50 people, where it's very attainable for us to have that kind of relationship with 12 to 14 people. So the challenges going forward was, one, how do you make a graceful transition? How do you divest yourself of those volunteers who just are fit anymore in the new program? And we did that, and all the collateral material for our synopses will be shared with you. We sent a rather large file, a file with a number of different attachments in it up to ACCE, and they'll be able to share all of that with you. But we basically thanked all the volunteers and celebrated what TRC had meant to the chamber. Then we gave it a little bit of breathing time. Then we announced the new program and just shared with everybody who the new group of people would be. For those who were transitioning, did no longer have a volunteer associated with their account, we contacted all those accounts, and some of those we left with staff, and some of those we assigned, but there's more on that in a few minutes. And then we developed some specialized communication tracks for each one of our target markets. So we did it for members, we did it general public, we did it for our board, so they could talk intelligently about it and deal with those volunteers who were a little disgruntled that they weren't invited back. And then we shared all of that with the sponsors so that they knew what was going on and they knew who their contact was going to be going forward. The other thing we had to do, which all of us could understand, when you change something like this, and the TRC program, as I mentioned earlier, had devolved to the point where it wasn't a whole lot of fun. So we had volunteers who agreed to come on board with us, but I think they were a tad bit skeptical in the beginning, some of them, that, yeah, this is what you say you're going to do, but how show us that you're going to do what you said you were going to do. So we spent a lot of time working with one another, sitting around the table, having the discussions. They would share things, ask us questions. A few of them challenged us on a few things. And we just had frank, open discussions and shared with them the methodology, how we calculated things, all the way back to how we structured, why we were requiring certain levels of production to go on the trips and what that meant and what we were willing to invest in that trip and what our available amount of money to apply to this program was. We had a lot of very interesting discussions as we went through that. And it probably, again, when Chris and Lisa have a chance to weigh in on this, it'll be interesting to hear their thoughts on this. But it probably took us 6 to 8 months to get to the point where everybody trusted each other. And, where they said, yeah, Chip's serious about this, he's not blowing smoke. So that took a while to get that trust among them because, as one of the key volunteers on this team told me when we were chatting about this, he said, I was really close. He said, I was really close to just saying, I'm resigning. I'm not enjoying this anymore. It's not worth the effort. And so we were kind of at that point before we made this transition. So I think when you talk about success and what you have to do to success, we spend a lot of time developing a comm plan. And as I mentioned earlier, we did that in groups, so targeted groups. And we tried to sit back and anticipate internally where all the areas of concern were going to be and how to address those, all the way down to we had some volunteers that would poison the well because they were no longer involved. So how were we going to get to their contacts before we made the announcement to kind of give them a soft preview of what was coming? And then we had, as I mentioned, or here in the bullets, we had the volunteers that were not moving on with the program, how to take care of them and make them feel like they weren't being kind of pushed off to the side, that we thanked them for what they did. Membership, sponsors, and the general public. So we developed customized kind of strategies for each one of those. And then we wanted to figure out a way, since we were making this a more elite group, is how do we highlight the value of this group, what they mean to us, and how do we do that? And this has morphed over time, but we did some special articles in the beginning. We did special targeted communications. As I mentioned earlier, we have a special section on the website that has their pictures, their direct contact, and that's a request that came out of a meeting one day that we were sitting around the table, and a couple of the volunteers said, well, some of these people don't know who I am. They don't know if I'm really part of the chamber or not. And it really would be nice to have something where they could just refer to that on the website. And that was an easy fix. I think we had that up within about 2 weeks by the time we got pictures and everything from everybody. And then this last year, we took it up a notch where we were able to recognize the key producers at the annual meeting. So we had 2 individuals that hit that $100,000 mark. So the success measures for us, morale is, I don't think it could have gotten much lower from when we discontinued TRC, but morale between the volunteers and the staff is very high. And again, I'll look forward to hearing Chris and Lisa's comments on that. But it's really a team, and the team gets along very well together. That's another nice thing about having a group less than 20 is really have to feel that camaraderie, and we really enjoy spending time with each other. They might not with me, but I enjoy spending time with them. So it's been a very, very good experience for us. Satisfaction with the sale process, we've gotten really high marks from our sponsors as far as they're pleased with it. And one of the interesting thing about this group is, because I've been out on this a couple times, I've had as many as 3 of them at one time trying to sell a person a sponsorship, and they asked me to come and talk, but 2 others were supporting because only one of them's going to get credit. So, they're all supporting each other, which makes it really nice. Our production has improved from we made the change in 15. So in 14 to what we did last year was a 17.6% increase. And one of the things that I'll spend just a couple minutes talking about is the cost of sale. When I took over the chamber 6 years ago, I came in and started asking questions about what is our cost of sale, and it took a while to get the answer to that question because nobody was really thinking about it in those terms. And it was running us between 24 and 28% cost to what we sold as far as overhead related to the program. And that did not include any staff time. That was just what we were doing as it relates to food and rewards and the trip and everything else. We've been able to reduce that to, I think this year is 14.36% is what it's currently our overhead. And that includes having a staff person to support them. So the overhead associated with her is incorporated in that cost. So we've been able to improve the quality of the event, improve support for the volunteers, and for some of those who are director counts, the support they get during the course of the year, and give them a better trip. I think we moved from a 3 this year. It was a 5-day trip that we had in February, and the venue was a tad bit better than would have been in the past. And so it's all in all a better, hopefully, again, Chris and Lisa will weigh in on this in just a couple of minutes, but overall better experience for the volunteers, a better experience for the sponsors, a much better experience for staff. So all in all, we were able to kind of improve the overall yield by making this transition. So with that, I'm not going to do Q&A just yet, but what I did want to do is open it up to Chris and Lisa, and we have literally 2 questions for them. And first of all is what did you see were the keys to success for the transition? And then after that, we'll get to kind of where they view it right now. But I'd like for them just to comment on whatever they think is relevant to the discussion right now. So I'll start with Lisa.
I really think that, coming from the being in TRC and was involved with that, saw a lot of fighting amongst the group, infighting amongst the group over different companies that they would represent, fighting over contracts. It wasn't a very smooth feeling with the companies that they represented. The companies were always having to make a decision on who got credit, and it was really bad. The morale was really bad. And then coming off of that to come to being on the Chamber On committee, the collaboration with the group, with our, who's on the team, we're all about what's going to be best for the chamber, what's going to be best for the companies, what we're going to be doing to try to, be on the same side as the company, what's going to fit their need in, the next year, what is it that we can help them with, what is it that the chamber needs to do for their business to promote them, what is it that we can show them that they're doing, the chamber's, doing for them, highlighting a lot of different types of advertising that they could do basically for free, and they didn't even know about it. And I think the collaboration within our group to know that, we're all about making sure that the companies that we serve are served on the same side as, that we're looking out for them, and the chamber is looking out for them. And then when we're in our group, if one volunteer is having an issue, and they can't get through to that company, it may be that there's another relationship in the group that we'll tag to and say, hey, help me get into the door. And the team members are very open and making sure that, that we get in. We'll bring in Chip, we'll bring in, Christy, anybody that can help us educate that company on what the chamber's doing for them, and making sure that they know that the chamber's here and helping their business with the economic impact that it's making. So it's a wonderful change, and I think your companies and our contacts will tell you that it's been great. So I'll turn it over to Chris.
I think for everyone that's on the phone and they're just looking to kind of build a strong program and perhaps modify one that they have that's in place, or looking to build a new one. For me, everything is about gathering the right group of volunteers who are there for the right reasons, and I would say as well the right number of volunteers. So for our population base here in Huntsville, the idea of having 14 or 15 volunteers is about right. It's enough to connect different parts of the community. You've got to have a diverse group of people, both by their job function and what they do, and by how they represent the chamber. You know, we are ambassadors for the chamber out into the community, and so you want to have a diverse group of people to do that. And so, you know, having that representation, and for people who have a manner of approach where they will listen and they will treat these companies that they're coming into contact with as the consumer. You've got to understand what it is that those companies would like to have, what it is that they need for their own success. And there's a certain kind of volunteer that I think that you have to kind of bring into place who's got the ability to kind of understand that context. The other big thing that I would just say is that there's so much value in having the right staff person. And this is going to sound like a paid-for endorsement, but it's not. Christy Drake with the Chamber here in Huntsville is exceptional. And she has exactly the right personality to deal with a strong team with strong personalities. Is that right, Christy?
I should say so.
And at the same time, have an incredible command of the information. So the person with your chamber who is managing all of the names of the companies, who's, you know, the primary contact for those companies, who are the new companies that need to be contacted, and what could be the right volunteer to reach out to them. And Christy has been just exceptional in navigating that territory. So I'd say that that's a key priority.
So one thing to maybe point out that I didn't cover earlier, but when we structured the new program, we did away with the incremental incentives, I guess is the best way to do it, where, you know, you get to this level and you get that, and you get to this next level, you get that. And if you do something fun this week, you get this little special whatever. We don't do that anymore. We just do the trip. We have a couple of little things that just kind of celebrate, you know, the person that does this first or that first, but that's just a little bit. There's not much there. That's just to have a little bit of fun. But it's really focused on rewarding the volunteers for the role they play through additional exposure to basically celebrate what they do, and to give them a very nice trip. So, and as I mentioned, that trip was 5 nights, 6 days this year. So anyway, what else do y'all, before we get into the last question, the transition piece, what are your feelings on about what was hard about that, or what was, because I mentioned earlier about having to earn your trust in this process, and how we are all a little disillusioned after the TRC was kind of running us all on the ground. What do you think were kind of the keys to us being able to forge that kind of the relationship we're enjoying right now?
I think, you know, one of the things that we heard in the transition, so Lisa and I had the benefit of the experience before the change, and then through it, and obviously after. And what we were perceiving of the chamber staff, Chip and Christy, and really the other extended team, is a desire to be just very transparent about why there were certain changes that were in place, why we needed that. And again, I think it goes back to the customer experience from these companies that you're interacting with. You know, they need to have a clear and consistent message from the people that are interfacing with them. It's not like they need, you know, 3 other extra people contacting them and saying, hey, I'd like to sell you this package for a sponsorship. And so being able to coordinate that and do it so with efficiency is a must on both the consumer side, and when I'm saying that, the companies that we're looking for sponsorship from, and from the volunteer side. So I would say, you know, the people that you're going to have as volunteers, you want them to be go-getters, to be listeners. You want them to be great representatives of the chamber. And for me, you know, I know, you know, my time is it runs in so many different directions. It's, you know, you're running so fast. And so you've got to have that ability to know that the communication with the chamber staff, Christy in our case, is going to be sharp and quick, and you know, give you the information that you need to run fast to you know, create the conversations and the commitments from the companies. I think Lisa and myself experienced that we've had the experience of dealing with a lot of different chamber coordinators from the staff level. And Christy just, and this is sounding like paid for endorsement, I'm sorry, but she's outstanding in the communication with the volunteers to give them what they need to do so that they can run fast. And I don't know that I perceive that to be the norm or the standard in the years prior to that. And it was very clear that, from the top down, from Chip's first discussions about this, that he wanted to treat our time as valuable. He wanted to have the right people having the conversations with the key companies, and so that made a big difference from the volunteer perspective.
Okay. Absolutely, and I agree with Chris. It's been an amazing transition, and I really just really just give the chamber kudos for doing this, and I think the transition for everyone that was involved, from where we came from initially and getting to where we are now, it took a lot of time, a lot of building up that trust again with the chamber staff. Like Chris said, there were a couple of different staff members that are not here anymore that, but we had to build that trust again with the chamber, and they showed a lot of transparency to us so that we could understand, why we were having to change, and that meant a lot to all of us that are here. So having that trust with the chamber makes a big difference.
Can I ask something, Chip?
Sure.
Christy Drake here. So when I started back in 2015, seems like yesterday, I came in kind of mid-campaign, and I knew that there could possibly be a challenge with some of our volunteers. So I made it a priority to spend one-on-one time with each volunteer, and I think that it definitely worked because they've turned out to be phenomenal. We share information, they help when they can, and we just have a great group of volunteers.
I really do.
Yeah.
So one other thing before we open it up for questions, it would be just to let everybody know, one of the other problems that we had during the TRC campaign that we rectified when we launched this program is there was a policy that during the TRC campaign, the TRC volunteers would serve as their contacts. So we have, instead of ambassadors here, we call them emissaries. They would hand them from the emissary to the volunteer, and then at the end of the campaign, they get handed back to the emissary. That was just a screwy idea. It didn't work. Confused the member / sponsor, and then it just didn't have a good outcome. So what we did when we set this program up is each one of the companies that the Chamber on Volunteer manages, they are the emissary for that particular member. So if there's a communication needs to be had with that member, then they handle that. And that's made things a lot smoother because we're not handing people back and forth to other folks, and it just eliminates that chance for confusion because we try to eliminate that every chance we get. So that was just one of those things we put in place. So we're now ready to answer questions if you have some questions.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys, so much for that, and really appreciate the information and insight into the evolution of your program. And yes, now's the time to type in your questions if you haven't done so. Just go to the question box on your webinar panel on the right-hand side, type in your question and send it to me, and I will read it out. So the first question we have, it's a good, just for context, how many members do you have? What's the size of your community and your chamber annual revenue?
Chamber annual revenue with 4.1 million. The community size, there's a number of different ways to measure that. So cities, about 190,000. Trade area is about 385, and so the market's in that 385 to 500,000. Depends on how you measure the market as far as labor shed goes and where economic development. So we kind of look at it that way. We have 2,146 members, I think, as of this morning, and there is just one other bit of information. There's one other small chamber in the market It has maybe 400 members. There's another city in this community, so there's a small, what I would deem a retail kind of focused chamber in the market.
Okay, and how many of your members support the program sponsorships?
221 members are participating in purchasing sponsorships, and that goes higher than that, but that's
okay.
During the course of the year. That's where we are right now.
Okay. So the next question, she says she's curious how the program works with your sales team as far as leads, commission, and can your volunteers recruit year-round?
Yes, the volunteers do secure sponsorships year-round. They are a very significant part of our ongoing activities, especially on events that are coming up that we may have some open sponsorships or open tables. They surge in there and help us kind of fill those out. And sometimes we have special events that take place during the course of the year, and they will engage with us on that as well. So that's a huge benefit to us. We try to keep our sales people selling memberships. We don't let TRC volunteers sell memberships. One of the things we found a few years ago was volunteers don't understand. Well, not I won't say they don't understand. Don't always frame the value proposition in such a way that we do. So we want to have that ongoing relationship come from staff and people that have been trained in doing that. They excel at selling sponsorships because of the relationships they have, but memberships are a little bit different animals, so they don't do that. The only thing that we allow our membership sales people to sell are ads, and as that becomes more robust, some of that gets pulled away, but they can only sell advertising to the members that they bring in. They can't sell it in general.
Okay. Are you using a custom-made software like YGM TRC?
We use Easy TRC, and I wish we didn't have to. So we've been trying to figure out another platform for that. Unfortunately, it's kind of crazy expensive to develop your own. So we've been working through that. And one of the benefits of having Christy on our team is if for some reason that is not functioning well, then we can go in and do our own contracts and send those out. So that's we've made that process work, but we've looked for other alternatives to that program, and we haven't been able to find one yet that works.
Okay.
Great question.
There's another question. She said that the next question is, do you now use, is she interpreting it correctly that you use a team approach with your volunteers?
Yes, we do. So our volunteers meet around the table, and we talk about different prospects, leads, sponsorships, and some of them around the table. It's kind of interesting. They'll sit around the table and go, well, I think that might be a good one, and I know that person pretty well, so I can go with you if you want me to help sell that. And so, as I mentioned during the discussion, I got invited out, and these were two of the volunteers right here, and there was one other that asked me to go out and help sell a sponsorship to somebody. So all four of us went out, and it was really one person's contract. But there's a fair amount of that goes on where they think, I know somebody over there. There might be a change within a company, and the point of contact is somebody that somebody else knows, so they introduce them for that volunteer to continue to move. So yeah, it's a very strong team approach, and we've really seen this kind of come into play as the group's gotten smaller. This never would have happened. I don't think it would have happened during the old TRC program. But right now, it is a fairly regular occurrence where they'll sit down and start strategizing and figuring out, who would be a good fit for this particular sponsorship or something else, and offer of others to go with them. Another excellent question.
Okay. Do your high dollar investors have first right before the general membership?
Yes. Excellent question. So what we do is we have a campaign that takes place prior to Chamber On launching. For all of our people who are investing in what we call REGI, which is our economic development funding campaign, well, it funds other things, but primary economic development. So out of that $4.1 million budget, we secure about $1.35 million out of this investor group of about 143. We go by level of investment. So the top level private sector investor gets first choice of presenting sponsorship, and then we go all the way down to I think we stop it at the $5,000 level of investment, and they get an opportunity to go through and pick the presenting sponsorship they want in order of their investment. Once we have finished that exercise, then we turn over the remaining presenting sponsorships and put that in the TRC campaign. Then the TRC volunteers can handle that, sell those. But the other ones we sell directly. Christy and I manage that, mainly Christy now, so I'm so happy to have her here, so she's managing it. And that normally starts in December.
Gotcha. All right, so there's a couple of questions about incentives. One is, are the volunteers awarded as the incentives, or as a team, or individually, or both? And another one is, do you share the credit when a team goes out, or does one person get the credit?
So we do individual, but it's interesting. Sometimes in the past, when it's short, somebody will want to allocate some of their money over to somebody else so they can make the trip. So you see that on occasion. But I think our level 55 to go on the trip here. So it's $55,000 in sales for 2 people to go on the trip. And if somebody sells well above that, then what we'll do is we'll upgrade their room or try to give them something else. But usually that's not it. They make the trip and they're just blowing through it. And like I said earlier, we did special recognition annual meeting for the 2 individuals that kind of really went above and beyond. But we try to take every opportunity we can during the course of the year just to thank them and celebrate what they do.
Okay. So it's individual goals that get the trip,
individual
or
goals
the incentive.
It's about $1,000 in sales for 2 people to go on the trip.
Okay. When do you launch Chamber On each year?
So we launch mid-March, and it's going through into July.
Okay. All right. Well, those are the questions that we've gotten so far. If anyone else has any other questions to follow up, feel free to type them into the webinar panel question page. In the meantime, just a reminder that I will include presentation and the resource documents that were presented as part of the Chamber of the Year application. So lots of the details and other documents related to the Chamber On program. I'll post those all with the webinar recording, and you can find that on our ACCE website. Click on ACC University Online and then on webinars. So very easy to find, and they will be there all in one place, the recording, the resources, the presentation, all in one place on the web page. All right, a couple other questions trickling in. Are you selling sponsorship for the following year or just the following 12 months? Following calendar year?
Well, actually, our sponsorships go from July 1 to June 30. So we're selling in advance. But if there are holes in current programs that we need to fill, then they can fill those as well. So it just depends on what's going on. And the nice thing about having the group set up the way it's set up is it's very fluid. So, and we have a lot of fun with each other, but they're very engaging in saying, you know, how can I help? And I'll, you know, and we'll bring things up. So yeah, normally this campaign is selling for July 1 through June 30. And then, so that's July 1, 18 to June 30 of 19. And then they'll also fill in some if we have open slots. And then if we add a new program that wasn't in the catalog, then they'll ramp up and help us sell that, because we do have things that pop up rather quickly especially with elected officials, because the timing, we don't always have that much lead time on them.
Right. Another popped up. How long is your campaign? How long is the actual campaign that starts in March?
Yeah, 4 months.
4 months. Okay.
Yeah.
And then a follow-up question on sales for the trips. This person asked, was it $5,000? It's $55,000 in sales for a trip, right? For two
Correct.
people? Is that?
People, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, do y'all, Chip, Christy, Lisa, Chris, do you have anything else you want to add, or Dave, just sort of
I would say, for the volunteers
up?
that you have, or for those that you select to be on the team, you've got to make sure that they have a passion for the community, making sure that they love the chamber and what it stands for us. So, we're not there to make the commission. We're not there to, it's wonderful to be able to go on a trip, but I think you need to be looking for that volunteer that really knows what the chamber brings to the community and loves, and loves what it brings to their, to their clients. So, that's the kind of person you need to be looking for when you're looking at the volunteer that you're selecting. Goal-oriented is very important. A big cheerleader is very important, I would say. So.
Yeah, I think I would just, emphasize, that you may want to kind of do interviews in a way before you actually bring on and name, the members of that team. And keep in mind towards having people from different sectors of the workforce, people that are bankers, people that work in defense, people that, would allow your chamber to connect to all different parts of the community. I think that's very important. It kind of reminds me of that movie, I think it's called Moneyball, where they have the guy who's done a lot of research on having the right people involved. They're not necessarily all the all-stars. It's people who fit well together and they serve their functions, whether it's an all-star in one particular position or that they're a utility player and that they can be part of the glue that pulls people together. So that, and making sure that of your staff that you've got somebody who's exceptional and outstanding at communication with that range and diversity of people.
And we also, in the initial startup of the team, we did personality testing, and that was forthtelling because of the 11 that we had a lot of, we did it with the colors. I've done it with, being a lion, a dolphin, a bear or a bee. But anyway, you don't understand what I'm talking about. Do that personality testing with the group, because I think you'll find certain things about that person that maybe you thought, oh, I didn't know that. So it really does help kind of bring the team more together, more like glue, because you kind of know what that personality, and where they are. So that was really quite helpful and a lot of fun for all of us on the team. So.
Well, Lisa brings up a good point. The team building on that end was very important for us in making sure we had that cohesive group of folks that after we went through the process of transitioning out of TRC, to try to get everybody to bond and feel like a team. The other part that Chris mentioned and ties back into what I shared earlier on during the overview of the slides, it was very critical for us when we had those series of meetings, and we invited the people we really wanted to hear from in the TRC program, and we probably had 18 or 20 people that participated in those luncheon meetings where we talked about TRC and where it was falling down and what we needed to do to kind of turn that around and get their input on what that might look like. That really did serve as an interview process where we were taking notes on how people were sharing their comments and where they were being productive or whether they were venting. And venting's okay, but venting with a little constructive would be better. And so we started identifying, making a short list of the individuals we would invite to participate in this new program. and that really served as an interview process for us. And then it's kind of fun when you start thinking about adding new people, because we got to, you got to vet it with all these guys to make sure they're okay to let them in as part of the member of the team. But then they help take care of them and get them ramped up. So that process worked well. And one last parting comment is I realized, because I talked to a number of my colleagues, and I was sharing with my volunteers here before we got started, a number of my colleagues thought I was crazy for going through the exercise of blowing this thing up. And it's not without risk, and it's not without a lot of kind of consternation and gnashing of teeth, because you know what you have, and you're comfortable knowing you have what you have, although it may be declining. It's what you know, and the unknown is always very difficult. But I would say that the risk is well worth the reward, in that we have benefited tremendously by having this elite group of folks engaged, providing guidance, and it's a blessing to be able to have them here now, especially compared to where we were before. That's it for me.
Okay, guys, thanks so much. Actually, I got one final question and a little bit about group dynamics as well. How did you delicately tell volunteers that we're no longer going to be involved, that they're no longer involved in the campaign?
We thanked them for their service. We did a little article talking about, listed everybody's name and said how wonderful the program had been, and that we just appreciate everybody doing it, and that we would soon announce kind of a new program take its place. So we did a few things, sent them all a personalized thank you note, and I think the chairman signed it, and I did as well, if I remember correctly. So we knew there were going to be bruised feelings, but at the end of the day, we basically just said we might lose a volunteer or two, we might lose a member or two, but if we don't do it now, we won't have the ability to do it later. So we just kind of bit the bullet and did that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for presenting, Chip, Christy, Lisa, and Chris, for your different perspectives and information. We really appreciate it. And thank everyone else for your participation and your great questions. Our next ACC University webinar will be another edition of our e-tour of ACCE's website resource, acce.org. And it's going to take place next week, Wednesday, May 9th at 12:30 East Coast time. You'll learn how to make the most of your membership, including how to search our ever-growing sample library, 4,000 plus documents at this point, sign up for e-communications in interest areas, find information toolkit, samples, survey results, and answer your chamber questions on lots and lots of different topics, including fundraising, non-dues revenue, membership development, communications, and more. So please register for that. If you haven't been on one of our e-tours, you can register for it on our ACC events page, which you can get to by clicking on professional development, hovering over events, and clicking on upcoming webinars. So thank you again, all of you. Wishing you all a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you next time for our next ACC University webinar. Have a great afternoon. Bye.